My name is Lillian Carter, and at 33 years old, most people would have called me ordinary until last spring, I might have agreed. I lived quietly in a small brownstone on the Upper West Side, taught creative writing at the local community college, and watered my collection of half-alive houseplants every Sunday. If you passed me on the street, you'd never guess there was anything unusual about my life. And perhaps there wasn't, not at first glance. But every family has its secrets, every story its shadows. Before I go any further, I'd love to know where you're listening from. And if you've ever found yourself the outsider in your own family, you may find a piece of yourself in my story. You see, I wasn't born into power or prestige, but I married into it. The Carters were old money New York through and through. Think oil paintings above the mantel, summer estates in the Hamptons, private trusts with so many zeros you'd lose count. I met Alexander Carter, the eldest son, at a book launch downtown. He quoted Whitman. I laughed and spilled wine on his shoes. That was our beginning. If you know anything about families like the Carters, you know there's always a golden child. In our family, it was Alexandra, Alexander's twin. She was everything I was not: tall, dazzling, and seemingly born for the spotlight. From a young age, Alexandra floated through life collecting trophies, praise, and applause. At the family Christmas party, she dazzled the guests with perfect French and charming stories from her time in Paris, while I lingered at the buffet wishing for a moment of quiet. Their mother, Evelyn Carter, made no secret of her preference. Alexandra always makes us so proud, she'd say, voice ringing through the house at every holiday. Why don't you take notes, Lillian? You could learn something from her poise. When Alexandra donated $10,000 from the family's foundation, the room erupted in applause. When I organized a free after-school writing program, Evelyn called it sweet, but perhaps you should aim higher. But it wasn't always words that stung. There were moments burned in memory, small betrayals that seemed minor at the time but gathered like stones in a pocket. I remember my 30th birthday. Alexander had planned a quiet dinner for just the two of us, but at the last minute, Alexandra announced a business trip to Tokyo. Family first, Evelyn declared, and the dinner was canceled. No cake, no card, just a text from Alexander, promising to make it up to me. There was the year the Carters sponsored a citywide charity gala. Alexandra was named honorary chair, though the idea had been mine. You're not really a Carter by blood, dear, Evelyn said, when I asked why my name wasn't mentioned. It wouldn't look quite right in the papers. I swallowed the hurt and kept working in the background, writing speeches and designing invitations that bore Alexandra's signature. If you're still with me, let me ask, have you ever kept giving, hoping one day your efforts would be seen? For years, I helped behind the scenes. When Alexander's little sister lost her apartment, I quietly paid her security deposit, $25,000 wired anonymously. When Evelyn's favorite charity fell short on funding, I hosted a fundraiser under a friend's name and wrote the check myself, another $12,000. No one ever knew, no one ever thanked me. That's not why I did it. Or so I told myself. As spring arrived, the Carters were planning the most extravagant wedding New York had seen in a decade, Alexandra's, of course. She was marrying the son of a media tycoon, and the guest list read like a who's who of Manhattan. I was put in charge of coordinating the rehearsal dinner, but the real decisions were made behind closed doors, invitations sent without my input, my own name barely visible on the seating chart. What I didn't know, what none of us could have guessed, was that this wedding would set in motion a series of events that would expose every crack in the Carter family's glittering facade. Looking back now, I suppose I should have seen it coming. But some betrayals are invisible until the moment they cut you open. If you've ever felt like the shadow at your own family's table, stay with me. The story is only just beginning. Some nights etch themselves into memory so sharply you can recall the scent of the room, the trembling in your hands, the way voices sounded miles away. Alexandra's wedding rehearsal was one of those nights for me. The Plaza Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal and candlelight. Every guest looked ready for the cover of a society magazine. Waiters glided through the crowd and a string quartet played beneath the chandeliers. It should have been a night for joy. For me, it became something else entirely. Earlier that week, I'd received a text from Alexandra, formal, clipped with a link to an updated guest list. My name was included, but I wasn't seated at the family table. I told myself it was a mistake, just another oversight. By now, I'd learned to swallow small slights. What I hadn't learned was how to prepare for betrayal on a grand scale. If you've ever been blindsided by people you called family, let me know in the comments. It's a lonely club, but I know I'm not the only member. I arrived alone, Alexander tied up at a last-minute business meeting. Evelyn greeted me at the door, air kissing both cheeks as though nothing had ever passed between us but silk and good wishes. Darling, do try to be on your best behavior tonight. No need to cause any disturbances. The evening moved in a blur, toast, laughter, the constant clicking of camera shutters. Alexandra sparkled at the center of it all, surrounded by friends from her Ivy League days, her fiancé dazzling beside her. I hovered near the edges, half listening to talk of trust funds and summer homes, clinging to my glass of sparkling water like a lifeline. Then, as dessert was served, a hush fell over the room. The string quartet trailed off. On the ballroom's massive projection screen intended for a sweet family slideshow, an image flickered to life. It was a screenshot of a group chat. My name glaring and unmistakable beside a message that read, "She's only marrying into this family for the Carter fortune. She'd throw any of us under the bus for a cut." Beneath it, a photo of me cropped and unflattering as if I'd been caught in some sneaky act. I froze. A murmur swept through the guests' whispers, building like a rising tide. Alexandra's voice rang out sharp as cut glass. "Some people will do anything to be a Carter, even if it means stabbing their own family in the back." Her eyes bore into me. "Perhaps it's time we discuss what it really means to belong." The humiliation hit like a wave, hot, suffocating. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. Evelyn rose, smoothing her dress with exaggerated care. "I'm afraid, Lillian, it would be best if you left. Tonight is about family. You understand." Her smile never reached her eyes. The final blow came from Alexandra's fiancé, who spoke softly but without mercy. "We all saw the messages. I think you know the way out." I stood there, numb, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every other sound. I managed to hold my head high as I walked the length of that glittering room, past guests who turned away or whispered behind gloved hands. My own chair was gone by the time I reached the exit. A waiter had already cleared it, as if erasing every trace I'd ever been there. If you've ever experienced public humiliation, you'll understand that the pain lingers long after the applause and laughter die down. I didn't cry until I was blocks away, walking the city streets alone in heels that pinched and a dress that suddenly felt like a costume. That night, I slept at a friend's apartment, too ashamed to go home. In the morning, my phone buzzed with headlines: "Scandal at Carter rehearsal dinner, family feud explodes before wedding of the year." My inbox filled with sympathetic notes from colleagues and vague concerned messages from distant relatives. But in the middle of all the noise, one message stood out, a brief cryptic text from Alexandra's younger sister, Violet. "Not everything is what it seems. Don't give up." I read it twice, then a third time, the words lodging in my mind like a seed. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this betrayal than met the eye. Maybe I hadn't lost everything, not yet. If you've ever been pushed to the edge, only to find an unexpected hand reaching back, you'll understand the strange hope that stirs even in the darkest moments. My story, I realized, wasn't over. Not by a long shot. In the days that followed, the city seemed colder, the spring light harsher against the glass towers. It's a strange thing losing your place in a family. It's not just the dinners or birthdays you miss. It's the certainty, the sense of belonging, even in pain. I wandered through my apartment, the familiar rooms now filled with questions. My phone barely rang except for the odd call from Alexander, always brief and distracted. I could hear the tension in his voice, the effort to stay neutral to keep his mother and sister from erupting again. If you've ever been forced out of a circle you helped build, you know how empty your world can feel. The humiliation at the plaza had become the latest bit of gossip, replayed in private chats and public posts. I saw my own name trending, the greedy in-law, the outsider who finally showed her true colors. The messages in the group chat had been doctored, of course, but the truth had no audience. The scandal was far too juicy. For a few weeks, I retreated from everything. I called in sick, let emails pile up, ignored the stack of manuscripts on my desk. Even Alexander grew distant, overwhelmed by the wedding family politics, or maybe just tired of defending a wife no one wanted. Eventually, the invitations stopped coming. My absence became easier for everyone to ignore. Yet, in the stillness, there were small sparks of kindness. An old friend brought me groceries and told me not to read the tabloids. My colleague at the college left a note with a quote from Dickinson: "Hope is the thing with feathers." I tried to let that hope take root, but most days the loneliness won. And then one chilly afternoon, as the wind rattled the windows, there was a knock at my door. Violet stood on my steps, hands buried deep in her pockets, eyes darting down the hall. "I only have a few minutes," she whispered, glancing behind her as if someone might be watching. "Can I come in?" Inside, she looked around, hesitated, then pressed a flash drive into my palm. "You need to see what's on this. The group chat, the photos someone in the family set you up." She paused, voice trembling. "I don't know who you can trust, but I know you don't deserve what's happened. Alexandra, she's not as clever as she thinks." I stared at the drive, hardly daring to believe. "Why are you helping me?" Violet's eyes filled with tears. "Because I've lived in that house my whole life. I know what it's like to be invisible, to always come second. They did it to me too. I just learned to keep my head down. But you didn't. You fought to belong. That takes more courage than they'll ever have." Her words struck something deep inside me, a stubborn ember of pride I thought I'd lost. I thanked her, and Violet left quickly, her footsteps soft on the stairs. For a moment, hope flickered again. I plugged in the flash drive and scanned through folders of screenshots, emails, video clips. There it was, proof. The messages had been edited, my words replaced and twisted. Security footage from the hotel's hallway showed Alexandra meeting with a man I recognized as her fiancé's assistant, handing him what looked like a thick envelope. One file stopped me cold, a draft version of the group chat with timestamps that proved the evidence had been manufactured weeks before the rehearsal dinner. It was clear as day I had been targeted, framed in the most public way possible. If you've ever uncovered the truth after being wronged, you know it brings both relief and a new kind of rage. I spent that night poring over every detail, piecing together the scheme. For the first time in weeks, I felt something beyond pain. I felt resolve. The next morning, I reached out to an old college friend, now an attorney specializing in family law and trusts. She listened without judgment, then promised to help. "Lillian, you have more power than you think," she said. "But you'll need patience. These families protect their own, but even dynasties can fall." I thought of Violet's bravery, of the years I'd spent trying to fit into a mold that was never shaped for me. I decided I would not let Alexandra and Evelyn write the ending to my story. I had lost so much, but I was not broken. If you've ever stood at the edge wondering whether to step back or leap forward, you'll understand the strange courage that comes with nothing left to lose. The fight for my name and my future was only beginning. There's a point in every story where the victim learns the rules of the game have changed. For me, that point came as I sat in the office of Margot Lynn, my old friend and attorney, watching her scroll through each file Violet had risked so much to deliver. Margot's office was all glass and steel, high above the city. The sun set behind her in streaks of gold and blue. "You've been wronged, Lillian. But you know what else? You have leverage more than you realize." She explained it plainly. The Carter family's empire was not just reputation and glitter, but trust funds holding companies' shares spread out in careful legal webs. When I married Alexander, a portion of shares and trust payouts had been transferred to me, but with so many conditions I'd hardly noticed. "It's not just about money," Margot said. "It's about control. Your exclusion wasn't just social, it was a prelude to pushing you out legally." I let that sink in. For years, I'd believed I was barely a footnote in the family's affairs. Now I saw the outline of a plan: isolate me, strip away support, and quietly amend the trust before anyone noticed. But the twist Margot pointed out was in the documents themselves. Buried in the fine print of the Carter family trust, a clause written decades ago, never revoked, stated that any spouse cut out of the family without due process would be entitled not just to their original share but a compensatory claim for wrongful exclusion. The clause had never mattered before. The Carters had never imagined someone would have both motive and evidence to invoke it. "Can we really fight this?" I asked, half in disbelief, half in hope. Margot smiled, but her eyes were steely. "Not only can we fight, we can turn the whole thing inside out. But you'll need to be methodical. No emotional outbursts, no social media. We build quietly, document everything, and strike at the right moment. And Lillian, you're going to need to face them all in person." Those weeks were some of the hardest I've ever lived. Each day brought new hurdles, media requests, Alexander's increasing absence, friends and acquaintances choosing sides. My apartment felt like a bunker, my world reduced to legal files and late-night calls with Margot. Yet every piece of evidence added fuel to my resolve. The humiliation was no longer just a wound, it was a weapon. Alexandra, Evelyn, and their circle had paraded their victory before the world, never expecting I'd have anything left to fight with. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from rubble, you'll understand pain properly used can become the most potent tool in the world. The final confrontation was set for a Monday afternoon, an emergency family board meeting at the Carter Foundation headquarters, all the senior family members and legal counsel in attendance. I arrived in a simple navy dress, hair pulled back, hands steady. Violet greeted me in the lobby, her support quiet but fierce. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "you're not alone." The room buzzed as I entered, the Carters in their tailored suits, eyes cold, waiting for another scene, another humiliation. Alexander sat at the end of the table, pale and silent. Alexandra was radiant in white, her diamond earrings winking in the harsh light. Evelyn presided, lips pursed, a stack of documents before her. Evelyn started the meeting briskly. "We're here to finalize some overdue business, Lillian. In light of recent events, the family has decided your involvement in the trust and company is no longer appropriate. There are papers here for you to sign, voluntary relinquishment, of course." Her voice was smooth, but her gaze was hard as steel. Alexandra smirked, barely hiding her triumph. The lawyers shifted, ready to shepherd me out of the Carter story once and for all. I let the silence stretch, then placed my own folder on the table. "Before we proceed, there are a few things I'd like to clarify for the record." Margot, calm as ever, took over. She produced copies of the trust, the unedited security footage, and the chain of messages, complete with digital forensics reports proving their manipulation. She outlined the sequence of events: Alexandra's orchestration, Evelyn's compliance, the assistant's involvement. The air in the room grew thick. Evelyn tried to cut her off. "This is not the time for..." Margot held up a hand. "On the contrary, it's exactly the time. Under the Carter Trust Section 15, paragraph C, any spouse forcibly removed from family governance without due process is entitled to a full independent review, and if wrongfully excluded, a claim on assets equal to or exceeding the original share. You orchestrated a public expulsion, broadcast false evidence, and denied due process. The legal liabilities are significant." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Alexandra exploded. "This is ridiculous. You're just bitter, you never belonged here. Money won't buy you love or a family." I met her eyes steady. "You're right, Alexandra. Money doesn't buy love. But the truth can buy justice, and sometimes that's enough." Evelyn, ever the strategist, tried to regain control. "We can settle this privately, Lillian. No need to drag the family name through the mud." But Margot pressed on. "This will go to arbitration as required by the trust. And if the board finds in Lillian's favor, not only will her original assets be restored, but compensatory damages may be awarded. I recommend you all review your own correspondence, digital and physical, before we proceed." The next days were a blur. The arbitration unfolded with all the drama of a courtroom thriller. Witnesses called, evidence displayed, every ugly detail of Alexandra's plot laid bare. The press caught wind of it. Headlines speculated, alliances shifted. Through it all, Violet stood by me. Her testimony about what she witnessed behind closed doors tipped the scales. The final verdict came 2 weeks later. The board found in my favor. The messages and evidence were forgeries, my exclusion both unlawful and malicious. Not only was my original trust share restored, but the compensatory claim granted me control of a new independent foundation, one with enough funding to change my life and others forever. I left the Carter offices that day to a crowd of cameras and reporters, but I kept my head high. I hadn't just cleared my name. I'd set a new precedent for anyone who'd ever been humiliated, betrayed, or underestimated. If you've ever found the courage to stand up to power, family, or otherwise, you know that real revenge isn't in watching others fall. It's in reclaiming your own story and stepping into the light on your own terms. Some reckonings arrive with thunder and spectacle. Others come as a quiet gathering, the weight of truth finally tipping the scales. For the Carter family, it was both. After the arbitration, the board ordered a mandatory family assembly, one last meeting before the press release would go out and the world would know the truth. The setting was the Carter Foundation's grand conference hall, walls lined with oil portraits of solemn ancestors. The same portraits that once seemed to judge me now felt irrelevant, mere shadows of a past that had lost its hold. I arrived early, Violet by my side. My heart was calm, calmer than I expected. There is a certain freedom I've learned in having nothing left to hide and nothing left to lose. The room filled slowly. Alexander's silent eyes rimmed red from too many sleepless nights. Alexandra, still radiant but paler now, her confidence cracked. Evelyn, proud and icy, her every move calculated to save face. Lawyers settled in at the long oak table, press liaisons checking their notes outside the door. The entire family, cousins, aunts, uncles, gathered to witness the denouement of the Carter drama. The chairman began. This meeting is called to formalize the resolution of all outstanding issues and to recognize the findings of the recent arbitration. His voice echoed through the marble and glass. Before we proceed, is there anything anyone wishes to say on the record? Evelyn spoke first. Regardless of what has transpired, we remain a family. We have all made mistakes. Let us resolve this matter with dignity and privacy. I looked at her for a long moment. Evelyn, dignity isn't something you get to invoke after you've orchestrated someone's humiliation. You called me family when it suited your image, never when it cost you comfort. She bristled, but Alexandra interrupted, voice trembling. So what you got what you wanted, money, attention. That's all this ever was for you. Violet stood then, her hands trembling but voice clear. No, Alexandra. Lillian was the only one who ever treated me like family. You all turned your backs not just on her but on anyone who wouldn't play by your rules. Murmurs spread. The old guard looked uncertain. Some shifted in their seats. The chairman gestured to Margot, my attorney. Miss Lynn, please summarize for the board. Margot rose, clear and concise. Our evidence established beyond doubt the coordinated effort to exclude Mrs. Carter from both the family trust and public life using falsified digital communications and social humiliation. The arbitration board found this action unlawful and in breach of the trust's own covenants. Mrs. Carter's claim stands. Furthermore, as per the ruling, Mrs. Carter will be assuming management of the newly created Carter Equity Foundation with full authority and funding. A hush fell. Alexandra's fiancé, sitting at the far end, suddenly cleared his throat. For what it's worth, Alexandra, you told me it was harmless, a bit of family politics. You let us all go along with it. He stood, collected his things, and left the room without another word. The next blow came from an unexpected direction. A lawyer previously loyal to Evelyn spoke up. Mrs. Carter, on behalf of several of the board's independent members, I'd like to formally apologize. The family's actions were not only cruel but reckless. If you'll have us, we hope you'll accept our support moving forward. For the first time, Evelyn looked truly shaken. What do you want, Lillian? Public retribution. You've already humiliated us. Are you happy now? I answered softly but firmly. I want what you always claimed to represent, integrity. I won't pretend this pain can be erased. But the world will know what happened here, not because I want revenge, but because others deserve the truth. And because families, real families, should be built on more than appearances. A staff member entered, whispering to the chairman. The first press release had gone live, headlines already circulating: Carter family scandal, heiress vindicated in legal battle, digital evidence overturns public humiliation. Reporters gathered outside, their lenses trained on the doors. There was no going back. I stood facing the room that once decided my worth. For years I tried to earn your respect, thinking if I just gave enough I'd be accepted. But dignity isn't given by others, it's claimed from within. And now I claim mine. As I left, a few family members reached out, apologies, confessions, requests for forgiveness. I took some hands, declined others. Violet hugged me tightly, whispering, "You did it. For all of us." When I walked out into the late afternoon, the press surged forward. I gave a short statement. No one should be forced to choose between truth and belonging. I hope my story will remind others, especially those who feel small in their own families, that justice is worth pursuing no matter the cost. Later that night, alone in my new office, I let myself cry, some for relief, some for the old pain, some for hope. I knew not every wound would heal quickly, but the weight was finally shifting. If you've ever witnessed a fall from grace, you know it isn't always satisfying. There's loss on every side. But in that loss, a space opens for something better. That was the end of one story and the beginning of my own. 16 months have passed since the day the Carter dynasty tried to erase me. Autumn again. Yellow leaves gathering in the gutters, a chill in the air that makes each breath feel cleaner somehow. I live in a sunlit apartment overlooking the park now, no marble columns or family portraits, but space enough for morning coffee and late-night laughter. Sometimes I still catch myself looking over my shoulder, expecting a voice to call me back to the old life. But each day, that voice grows fainter. These days, my routines belong to me alone. No more invitations I must chase, no duties to perform for someone else's image. I wake early, walk to the neighborhood bakery, say hello to people who greet me by name and mean it. My afternoons are spent at the new Carter Equity Foundation, which under my direction now funds after-school programs and legal clinics for those without family support. My name is on the door not because I demanded it, but because I built something that lasts. Some say revenge is a cold dish. I've found it to be much quieter, more like peace than triumph. The applause faded, headlines disappeared, and my own sense of self returned steady as the sun through my window. I thought about moving to another city, starting over completely, but I realized I have nothing to hide from. This is my home too. My circle is smaller now, but richer in ways the Carters never understood. Violet is still by my side, her loyalty one of the great gifts of this long ordeal. She moved into her own apartment nearby, and we see each other almost daily. Coffee, books, long walks where we talk about everything but the past. She's begun studying social work, determined to make a difference for girls like us who never fit their family's mold. I help where I can, sometimes as mentor, sometimes just as a friend. There are others too. Margot, my attorney, who has become family in all but blood. A handful of new friends who saw me at my worst and chose to stay. Even a few old colleagues from the college who never cared about the Carter name, only whether I showed up and tried my best. My world at last feels built on truth. As for the Carters, time has not been gentle. Evelyn resigned from the foundation board within the year. Alexandra retreated from the public eye after her marriage fell apart. Her former fiancé, now a distant memory, her reputation not quite ruined but never quite repaired. Alexander and I parted ways quietly, no angry words, just the simple end of something that had never been real. He sent a letter, one page full of regret and relief. I wish him well. I still get emails from distant relatives, cautious attempts to reconnect, but I reply only rarely. I have nothing left to prove. If you've ever had to redefine family, you'll understand what comes next. Real family isn't about shared blood or grand gestures. It's about the people who show up, who listen, who stay. I used to think belonging meant fitting someone else's mold. Now I know it means building a home inside yourself and opening the door to those who truly care. Looking back, I don't wish for what might have been. All those years I tried to earn a place at the table only to realize the table itself was rotten. The betrayal, the humiliation, the legal battle, they all taught me the same lesson. Your worth isn't given by others. It's something you claim, protect, and quietly celebrate. If you're listening and you felt invisible in your own family, I hope my story brings you comfort. You aren't alone. Sometimes the people who should love you most will hurt you the deepest. But it's never too late to start again. To choose your own family, your own path. To turn even the harshest ending into a beginning. So, tell me, what does family mean to you? Have you ever had to walk away to find your own peace? Leave a comment below. Your story might just be the encouragement someone else needs. The world may tell you that forgiveness is the final act. I say sometimes survival is enough. Sometimes simply living in your truth is the sweetest revenge of all.